Ralph, an astrophysicist, is driving late at night from his home in San Francisco to observe a meteor shower outside LA and meet his professor for his thesis, to hand him a paper he knows will not impress him. It deals with a purely materialistic vision of the universe, stating that a pure randomness, devoid of meaning, created the universe. Suddenly, he is struck by a meteor of strange nature, surrounded by a spiral of blue purple electricity, and blasted off the road. He is unscathed, but his car is totaled. His phone has no service. He does not know where he is, and his hunger comes and goes. Not a car comes by, and then, right when he is about to walk towards where he was going, a band of musical gypsies comes his way, appearing seemingly from nowhere. First, they feed him a purple soup, which he does not notice its color due to its great aroma. He scarfs it down with some bread. Soon after, he notices a young girl with fiery eyes who is looking at the night sky. He walks to her and begins to point out the constellations, trying to be manly and secure. But she stares at him and pierces through his soul. Then she recites a poem. Stars, light made eternal, by wind of heaven's grace, battle unconquered, surrender unanswered, all whisper death beyond their sight. He steps back, almost falling down, as though she had unlocked something in him, but something else was resisting it. He feels a furious love, a searing madness born from his heart and loins, and she knows she holds the reins. The rest of the night he is tied to her, seeking her eyes, which she is careful to keep from him. Finally, they sit by the fire, and he is quite drunk and quiet. They begin to dance, the rags from their sleeves flowing and shrouding and sparkling through the fire. Slowly, it all blurs, and they become sound, and he becomes that sound. He opens his eyes. Hot sand, very hot. Pyramids in the distance, his shoes are gone. Hot, hot, hot. As he makes his way to town, he is pompous as his usual self, but given his attire and sand-worn visage, the man who receives him, the pyramid-building foreman, takes him for a clever escaped worker. He quickly puts him to work under close supervision, and after complaining and being unable to do even the smallest labor tasks, he is taken to the mind doctor. The doctor looks him up and down and sees rather quickly that he is somewhat lost, so he asks him a few questions. Then he declares Ralph mad and decides the best thing for him to do is to return to work, but to do lighter work. Ralph is baffled and gets rather upset. The doctor gives him a sedative made from a glowing red stone, and he dreams strange dreams about his past, his parents, his grandfather, who was the only one around, and the poor quality of his presence, how he was a mathematician who explained everything away, his high-born status, the injustice. After his dream, he wakes and he is taken to go to work. Groggy and still sedated, in his mind he is unable to resist fully and submits. He works long hours for measly pay. A week passes by in a blur. The other workers begin to have a strange respect and pity for him, and finally one of them gets close to him and invites him to go with a few guys to go to a bar to drink. He has never had alcohol before. He gets very drunk and spends all his money on liquor and gets up on a table and begins to spout nonsense about how he is a highborn and doesn't belong here, and then he gets in a fight with a mid-level official who tells him to shut up and be a good worker. Ralph loses his mind at this and becomes enraged for the first time in his life and knows true anger, which he had fed his whole life through an overall resentment. Another young man, who later tells him he is a disowned nobleman, sent to work on the pyramids by his father, who has had enough of him, joins him and helps him beat up the mid-level official. He has eyes that very closely resemble those of the gypsy poet girl. They could easily be the same eyes. They hightail it out of the bar and head out into the desert, eluding their friends and the building supervisor, who was waiting by the door but got distracted in the commotion. They make a plan to head to the next city, where the starry-eyed friend knows someone in Alexandria, but he is not sure how to get there. However, Ralph does and uses the stars to direct himself. His friend takes note of this and asks him how he knows. Ralph says that he is an astronomer from the future. He tells him his strange tale. But this time he has a different perspective. He is broader in his view, and recounts his grandfather as a bitter man who did not know hard work or the companionship of man, and his parents as poor lost souls who chase riches and status. They arrive to Alexandria, to their destination, and before them stands a large, impressive door with strange inscriptions and an orange glowing stone. His friend knocks on the door, and as it starts to open, Ralph smiles and sighs with relief and turns to his friend. But in his place, he hears a sweet sound, a fragment of the melody he heard before coming to Egypt, and his friend vanishes into it. "Yes?" the man at the door asks with a lively face. "I came with... I don't know his name. I came from Cairo." He is speechless, having relied on his friend for this crucial moment. "You look hungry and lost. Come in. We will get you something to eat, and you will tell us more about yourself." Ralph walks in and sees a large mystical house with varied instruments, artworks, animals, people in varied arrangements, a feast for the eyes, heart, and mind. He wants to dive into each room and drink from each one, but his host makes sure to turn back and draw him close. Finally, he brings him to the servant's kitchen and sits him on a plain table, and a servant gives him a bowl of warm and delicious stew and water. Having traveled 2 nights in the desert with only a drink of water, he is very thankful for his meal. He thanks the service, he thanks everyone in sight. Once he begins to look around, he notices his host has been looking through a curtain at him, and now caught, bursts through it jubilantly and takes him into one of the lively rooms. To his surprise, everyone is talking openly and vividly about rather sordid subjects and laughing loudly about them. Then one man begins talking about what seems to be Ralph's life exactly, though slightly different, and this greatly piques his interest. The room turns a hazy orange and everyone disappears, but this man, and he begins to talk to him. He had never heard anyone speak in this way, and more than that, laugh about misfortune so joyously. Ralph begins to ask strange, broken questions to ascertain the man's identity, and the man smiles tenderly and puts his hand on Ralph's shoulder and plainly asks him, "Do you believe in a power greater than your own? Take for example that randomness you spoke of in your paper. Do you believe its power to be greater than your own?" "No. It is undirected, random, has no purpose, everything happens for no reason. It is only the human mind that can bring about order." Then the man looks up and gestures to look at the exposed sky, and they drift into the night, full of stars, and shoot far up, fast into the cosmos, until they are far beyond even the stars, and nothing is left but blackness. Suddenly, a small white light emerges. It is bubbling, unstable, but it explodes into flowers, fountains, temples, gardens, cathedrals. Ralph is bewildered and astonished, but he quickly returns to his refuge. "How did you do that?" he asks. "I didn't do it. It was the pure random force you speak of." "But there is so much order in it," Ralph says. "Where did the earth come from? The stars? Where did you come from? What brought it all together?" the man asks. An explosion erupts with brilliant colors and deafening sound. The man is back in the lively room, and the conversation has returned between the friendly strangers. Ralph is stupefied and almost begins to fall down, but someone places a chair below him. No one pays him much mind, they simply let him come to. Once he regains his senses, they take him to a nice bedroom where he sleeps. Wild dreams, fighting a strong and vicious tiger that wields 7 heads with tongues of swords. The next day he awakens and finds the entire house and its lively rooms and houseguests and animals has been reduced to his room, and a kitchen stocked with enough food to get him by a few days, and a nice garden ripe with fruit. No one is around, though there are houses nearby. He is not so surprised, though perhaps pleasantly taken by the experience. He decides to rest a few days, eat from the garden and the pantry. On the 3rd day he begins to wonder if everything is a dream, and begins to pace around the house, a creeping madness setting in. A snake breaks in through the window, and a sound within him pushes him to catch it by the head quickly and throw it out back again. He looks at his hand to see if he is cut or bleeding, but he is fine, and then before he tends to the window, he sees it is not broken anymore. A knock comes on the door. It is a messenger for the pharaoh, come to invite him for an audience. He is rather worried because he thinks he will be reprimanded for leaving the pyramid builder, but the messenger assures him that it is not because of that. He gulps. He gets on the camel-led carriage and begins the journey back across the desert. On the way back, he sees his friend who left him behind standing on top of a dune, or more, his eyes shining from its peak, and a wave of the hand, and then he vanishes. He is led up to the palace at night and into the main hall. The pharaoh seems pleased to see him. His eyes are the same as the gypsy girl's and his friends. "Do you know what you must do now?" the pharaoh asks him in a powerful voice. The man is taken aback, but not frightened. He notices the pharaoh's staff. It has a yellow stone, glowing, swirling. He looks deeply into it and sees his car on the road destroyed by the meteor. "Yes, thank you," Rav says with a newfound certainty. "I have been with you all this time, and I will be with you as you go on. Good luck." The pharaoh stretches out his staff and flicks it towards Rav. He warps and bends and becomes sound and light and disappears. Ralph is on the highway. He is still, calm. He sticks his thumb out. A car stops. "Where to?" "San Francisco. I have work to do."